Hello, I'm Ryan Malyar, and thank you so much for tuning into what I consider a very special episode of Arts for the Masses. The arts are alive in Massachusetts, and on this program, I like to dig into arts program, not just in Massachusetts, but beyond. And the topic we're covering today is something that can affect your arts community, so I hope you'll listen and share this message with other folks as well. So you know those people that are just doing terrific work in the arts community, and they're always on your radar, and you just really want to be able to connect and collaborate with them. Well, that's my guest today. We have Kira Troilo, and we've never had a chance to perform together, but she is just this well-rounded phenomenon of a human. She's an actress, a choreographer, a writer, a fantastic mother, and she's been making a huge impact in recent years as an EDI consultant through her company Art and Soul Consulting. Kira takes an empathetic approach to her work and believes that mindfulness is the key to growth, change, and genuine connection. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. This is really exciting.
It's exciting for me as well. So you wear many hats as a performer, as a choreographer, as a writer, and as an EDI consultant, which is what I really want to speak about today. And I just wonder how all of these different roles inform and influence each other.
Yeah. I've had to take some hats off.
Okay.
I have learned about capacity. It's, as a mom, it is really important for me to prioritize what's calling me the most at any given moment, because mom is kind of always first.
Sure.
So I've taken a little bit of a retirement from acting and choreographing at the moment because I feel so strongly about the EDI work that I'm doing and the inclusion work that I'm doing and really just making spaces better in theater and the arts. So there's that. I can't wear all the hats at the same time, and I've learned that lesson.
But if I know you'll be back on the stage soon. I know it. I know it. You can't resist.
Singing in a concert tomorrow.
Oh, great.
So, this little project.
Keeping the chops warmed up.
Yeah.
Lip trills all the time, singing to the children.
That's right. I have lullabies for the kids.
Absolutely.
That's good. So it's, that's the thing about theater too. It's, you can always come in and out, and it meets you at different parts of your life. So it will be back. But yeah, everything informs everything I do. And I think that becoming a mom 7 years ago to my first, Levi, that is what started my career as an EDI consultant, an entrepreneur. I think it just changed so much about me and made me really focus, I'd say, on how my own unique talents and what I am can contribute to making the world better. And honestly, that just sharpens when you have a kid. So
and wanting to provide a safe space for them to grow into and to have that unique power and insight to be able to start making change is incredible.
Yeah.
It is incredible.
Exactly.
Let's start to unpack EDI.
Yes.
Or some people refer to it as DEI, and I know you have a differentiation there, but how do you define EDI?
Sure. Yes. And thank you. I do this pretty much in every room I go into. I start with, we're going to define EDI.
Please.
Because I think people come with a lot of baggage around it. They think, even people who are in the field can disagree about what it actually means. So when I talk about it in the context of theater and art spaces, where I think in general, especially here in Massachusetts, we've got the memo about representation. So we don't have a problem really with, we need to see different people on stage. We need to have, Black folks represented and different gender identities, abilities, all of that. So to me, EDI is actually a formula that I've created.
Okay.
And I do E plus D equals I. So I'll break down what I think that means.
Okay.
E is equity. So to me, that's about systems. So creating systems that support people in whatever context they're in. So in really simple terms, it's how we operate. So equity to me is the thing that changes depending on the show you're doing, depending on the room you're in. How are we going to operate in this space to make sure people can succeed? Diversity to me is people, I say this, people tend to see me come in as an EDI or DEI consultant and they think race right away. And I always say, yes, and it's all the things that make us different. So I'm a mom, I've been pregnant.
You're a woman.
I'm a woman, right? I'm cisgender woman. I'm mixed race. There's a lot of unique things that make me me, where I connect with a lot of my Black colleagues, but we're different people. I connect with a lot of mom colleagues, and we're different people. So diversity is the things that make us all different.
And some things you can see on the outside, and some things are not as obvious.
That's right. There's, invisible disability. There's, and I'm using quotes podcast. There's a lot of different things that people are dealing with that make them different that you might not be able to see. And that's all a part of it, I always say. So to me, it's E, creating those systems, plus the D that support the diversity in the space or the diversity you want in the space. Then we can achieve inclusion. So when we create a plan for the people we have, people can feel like they belong, like they're supported, like they're empowered to do their best work. So here's the really, really, really simple way that we've talked about. How we operate plus who we are equals how we feel.
You lay it out and it seems so simple.
It should be.
But then when you try to wrap your mind around all the minutia of it, that's when it gets overwhelming.
Yes.
And that's, so let's rewind a little bit and what are the spaces that have you seen experiences in spaces that were not embracing these things naturally, and what are the steps towards creating this safer space?
Absolutely. So I think, and we're seeing this in the news right now, this is a loaded topic that has a lot of language and words and methods that have been, triggering to people. So they hear DEI or they hear EDI and immediately they think that they're going to be shamed or they're going to be told they're wrong. When I started, I'll go back to my son, because when I became a mom, COVID hit very shortly after that. I started writing about my experiences, just kind of questioning things about my theater experiences. Like, what does this mean? When I've been a choreographer on a production team, but the only person of color. And then I end up doing a lot of emotional labor because, there's just, maybe an all-white production team with an all-black cast and me and people kind of trying to get, have me do more of the work of the emotional stuff behind it. But just not having a language for how to communicate, like that how, to me, was really interesting. And I felt like there was a missing job. So
you've created the job.
I created the job.
And so what are sort of the foundations of the job? And I'm sure there is no blueprint because every organization is going to be very different.
Absolutely. And that's how it started, really, was in 2021 after, there was the racial reckoning and everyone was riled up and angry. And we started to do theater back in person. And people were on eggshells for a lot of reasons. So the first few jobs I did was really, something blew up at a theater company. A social media situation where people are, angry and people are in trouble. I don't want to get too into the details, but I didn't have training. I had started learning about diversity and inclusion online. Those programs that I worked on online didn't really seem to meet the need of the theater and shows. How do you go in and do...
Well, the corporate life is very different than what is expected in an artistic environment.
Yeah, you don't...
The demands of displaying emotion and the demands of physicality of your body are very different than a cut and dry corporate America situation.
Absolutely. And it's how do you use the same methods that you would use to go in, sit at a desk and type all day, that you'd use to perform a show about trauma or loss or, these intense themes we love to explore with art.
Right.
We need a different approach, and we need to not feel like we have to walk on eggshells, because then we can't have these good conversations that lead to brave, bold art.
Right.
So that's where I got in at first, was just, hey, I think I have a technique that works for some of these companies who were in trouble. Will you allow me to come in and facilitate a conversation and kind of train on, I had to practice, right? So it was a question. Can I go in there and have a conversation that's curious and compassionate, that involves everyone, that doesn't shame people or make people feel bad, but actually opens the room up to have a conversation about the tough thing? And the answer was a resounding yes. I tell the story I've told this on my own podcast, but about my first time working with a group was 20 plus, I'd say it was 20, 70 plus white folks who all wanted to come have a conversation about a recent firing that had happened of a person of color.
Okay.
In their group. And they were very confused about it, weren't sure how to talk about it or what was going on. I saw those people walk into my conversation. It was I think optional. 20 people came. Their shoulders were all the way up to their ears. They were all like holding their breath. I could feel it, and I'm a natural empath, so I can feel when people are nervous. And I opened by saying, I'm an open book. The only thing that I expect is that we remain calm and compassionate and curious. And those are 3 tenets of my company. And if we can do that, then we can talk about anything.
That's right.
And then after that conversation, I just noticed all their shoulders kind of go down. And about 10 of them approached me afterwards, because I said, please, I love to talk afterwards. Here's my email. Everyone had a question for me. And it was magic. And I knew I had something there that was working.
Well, even before we started filming this conversation, I was honest and upfront with you that these conversations can be difficult.
Yes.
And here I am in a public venue airing this conversation, and with the fear of, do I say the right thing? Am I saying the wrong thing? And you were able to put me at ease very quickly, because I know you, of course,
Yes.
too. But to say it's okay to make mistakes as well. But then it's about, what is the path forward from that mistake? Am I right?
You're so right.
Oh, okay.
And if everyone could just understand that, because it's so wild to me that we've had in the arts and theater no human person who's focused on, how do we disagree? How do we communicate? What tools do we use when we hurt each other? We haven't had that. So that is, it's that actionable thing that's going to help us have conversations. And I'll give you an example. I've done shows where, my husband is white, he's Jewish. I've done shows where a white person has to perpetrate racism against a black person. Now, I think that we've done piecemeal things, to maybe protect certain people in those environments. But what about having the conversations about the racism, the black person being able to talk to the white person and vice versa? Like, how do we safely get into a situation where they both feel, I use comfortable in quotes because it's always going to be a little uncomfortable,
Right.
but they have to be able to discuss it, right?
Yes.
I did a show where there was like a very bad white villain with a very young black woman. And we set up a room where we could talk about all the hard stuff, right? We set up how can they kind of meet each other on stage as these characters and then safely get out of character and connect as humans so that they felt good afterward. And I had them for a conversation on my podcast, and they're friends, we just have to.
Because why wouldn't they be?
Of course. But it was so beautiful for them to be able to get over that, like, oh, I'm so scared, I'm going to say the wrong thing or I'm going to offend. And we created a language and tools and skills that they could use to navigate through that.
And yeah, and you gave an example with race right there.
Yeah.
But we always have to remember that this EDI expands so far beyond that, and there are many different types of situations that occur in theater and the arts and in one-on-one conversations that can make people feel like they're in an odd situation where they don't have power. Whether it's and I've been really excited to see in many productions now people bringing on intimacy coordinators as well to handle things of a romantic type, or just communicating how touch can work on stage with the appropriate communication to make people feel more comfortable.
Yeah, and I think we've embraced that and expect that now, I hope, as a norm, that we shouldn't just be grabbing and touching and all of these things with people without having a professional to direct it, to choreograph it, so that it's staged.
Right.
And I came up, and I'm sure you too, when we were acting even a decade ago, where it was just like, yeah, do the kiss, yeah, do the thing, and that's wild to me now.
Yeah.
So I feel similarly about this, these communication and human skills. It's how do we expect to just throw people with no training in these high stakes, stressful situations with no tools to get through it?
Well, let's talk about people with training as well.
Yes.
You and I both have training. Mm-hmm. And as you begin establishing guidelines and boundaries and these different things, how are we still able to be free in the rehearsal room when I feel the inclination to touch your chin or to brush your hair? And as we're exploring a scene that has an intimate or violent nature,
Yes.
or any of those things.
Yes, I love that you asked that. And I think that it's far worse to not have those conversations and boundaries in place. I kind of compare it to a sandbox. Mm-hmm. If you know where the edges are, then you know where you can freely play.
Yes.
If you don't have any edges, and it's like I think of my kid in an open field, just wondering how far can I run before I get in trouble.
Yes.
So it's like if you and I, are doing a scene where we're being, romantic with each other. If I take the time to start off and say, how do you feel about me touching your face in general? And you say, oh, great. Everywhere on my face is great. Just don't touch my nose. Great. Then I'm free.
You are.
So I do the scene, and I won't second guess this. How does he feel about this? Is this okay? Is he gonna? No, I've checked. So I'm totally free. I won't touch your nose. And I know that that's your boundary.
And it's also establishing that everyone's creative process is different.
That's right.
And, I'm very open and I'm free. You can manhandle me, whatever. Treat me rough. It's all good. Don't hurt me. But,
That's right. But I often say that. I'm like, yep, all green, good to go.
Yeah.
There's different language that you can use depending on the room. I don't like to prescribe.
Yeah.
But whatever language people like to use, if it works, it works.
So if you're consulting with a group, it's the first day of rehearsal. We say, hi, here's our consultant. We have Kira Troilo. What are these first meetings that you're bringing to this space?
Mm-hmm. So I always start with how I started Art and Soul Consulting. So I already told you about my philosophy on EDI. I try to put people at ease and say, I'm here. Some of our tenets are that this is playful work. This is fun. We're putting on a play. This is preventive work. So I'd rather be here, introduce myself to everyone, and make sure everyone knows that I'm a resource and not be needed, rather than rushing in to put the fire out because there was no prevention in place. So I start there. I start by getting everyone on the same page. I make sure everyone knows that I'm for everyone.
Yes.
And then I talk about depending on this show. So like you said, there are invisible things, or there are things that might, we might have racial diversity in a show and people think that that's the thing that's going to be hard, but maybe it's, different generations at play. So we need to talk about how are the boomers talking versus how are Gen Z talking, and how can we create conversation tools that work for us in the space. That's a big one. What about people, I've worked with shows with disabilities. So how can people who are not disabled support the actors on stage who are, so it depends on what the play calls for and what the people are bringing again, the diversity. What are people bringing to the show?
If we take a step back from that, we were talking about, we already have a show, we already have people cast, you know? How about the organizational standpoint of creating these inclusive and diverse workspaces, of attracting this talent and balancing that with the needs of the theater, knowing who their audience is and picking works that can foster and support. It's so loaded to me. I don't know if that even gives you a place to jump off of.
Absolutely. I think it's all related. I think people tend to see this work as optional, or we don't have enough room in the budget. But we're seeing, as a world, what's important to people is connection.
Right.
And obviously art, as we talk about here, is so important to people's well-being. And places get a reputation for feeling great to work in or not feeling great to work in. So I believe so strongly that investing in constant support from the top, what's our mission? What are our values? What do we believe in? And then hiring appropriately, picking shows appropriately, engaging appropriately. And by appropriately, I mean in conjunction with how we feel and what we believe in.
Right.
I've seen this in real time. My favorite clients are getting a name for being great to work with and being great to work at because they put the time into building these relationships and making people feel as though it is baked in. It's not a statement. It's not a, in 2021, we wrote this statement and we believe in it. And then there's no follow through or people in the room to speak to it and to just actually be a support system.
You know, of course, I see the trend is post-COVID. A lot of theaters are struggling just to get butts in seats.
Yes.
And what I see is a lot of safe options for shows happening as well. And I've seen theaters that have tried to do more inclusive programming and back away from it because it didn't resonate with their audiences. And I just wonder what the step forward from that is as well. And something that comes to mind is, I read an article, that don't quote me on it, was, I think it was a Baptist church, I think, in Harlem. And where they're known for praising in a very uproarious, spirited way.
Love, yes.
And with a black congregation.
Yeah.
Where they would have
They like call and respond.
call and respond.
Yes.
And a certain type of praise music.
Yes.
And people would come and visit the church that weren't members of the congregation, and they wanted to see what this was. People from different cultures, from different nationalities, from all over the world, wanted to see what this was. So they figured out a way that they would charge them admission to their services and put them up in the balcony. And the congregation was uproarious at first.
Wow.
This is our private space. This is our culture. This belongs to us. And to have these spectators here felt like they were on display.
Yeah.
But then the financial benefit from it outweighed that conversation at some point.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I think about communities that maybe have a predominantly white audience base.
Yes.
And you decide to do a show with rich black themes. And how does it then feel for the artist on stage to be performing for this house? And I can speak for myself. I've toured in many different regions and places all over the world, and in Japan and specifically, we were a novelty. But they respected the art that we were doing. Did they totally understand what I was doing? No, because there was a language barrier as well. And just even the inflections and way we use our voices and our bodies is very different from them. So I could understand that balance of being a show pony, being on display, but also delivering something very significant. But on a much smaller level, how do we find that balance in communication? Because I don't imagine it always feels good.
No, and I have so many thoughts. So many thoughts. So, I mean, to your first point, I think that we have to educate audiences who don't typically come to the theater that the theater is for them.
Okay.
That's where I start with, the butts and seats thing, because we're working with old models right now. We're working with an old subscriber model. We're relying on old ways of getting people in the theater when we have new people. We need to reimagine how we get people into the theater.
And the younger we do it, the better.
That's right.
Because then it makes it a place that you're growing, and your children from the day they're born, they will always know that they can explore and have fun in the theater, whether they like it or not.
That's right.
But you have the option to this art.
Exactly. And we have to start there, because currently the theater culture, and I mean kind of like audience culture,
Yes.
is, you go in, you sit down, you're quiet, you watch the show. This is kind of the expected norm of shows. That's why I'm loving seeing like relaxed performances where folks maybe who neurodiversity is welcome. Like if there is noise or any other sensitivities.
Yes.
I love that you brought up like a black church, because blackout performances or brownout performances are something that's been happening a lot, and that's because there are theater spaces that don't feel safe, I'd say, to hoot and holler and yell and talk back and forth. I've been in spaces where, I've had my 5-year-old kid who is really engaged in the show, and someone turns around and shh. And it's like, no, but this is for him. It's a fun family show. Why does he have to be quiet? He's engaging with the show. So we have to reimagine what it is to come to spaces. In my perfect world, we don't need a blackout performance.
That's what I was sort of hoping you'd say.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering if that even adds another form of alienation to the audience, that this performance is for you.
Yes, exactly. And right now, I want to be clear, I understand needing a blackout. We're needing a space that it feels natural for folks to go and be and enjoy the theater. I want that to be every performance, right? I want it all to be welcome. It's live theater. It's why we're not sitting in front of Netflix. It's why we came out to be in community with each other.
Yes.
So that's the long-term work, and I can talk a lot about this, but the short-term work right now is, the racial reckoning happened. Theaters got the memo. We need to put Black people on stage. We need to put people of color on stage. So we made changes that were visual there. Well, there's a whole system that needs to change, right? We need change behind the scenes. We need to reinvigorate audiences or invite new audiences in. But we're in this place right now where we have literal performative diversity because we are performing on stage.
But we haven't tapped into the cultural part there.
Exactly right. And that's where my work comes in.
Yes.
Because I've been there. I've been in the color purple, where I'm an all-black cast and I'm looking at an all-white audience. And it feels different to different people. I know for some it's tiring and it can feel like you're at the zoo, but and I'm kind of all over the place, but I thought of this great example is, as an actor, I've been in an all-black cast with an all-white production crew. So I'm on stage singing, and I'm looking up to the lights are out, the technical people are doing their work. Someone is lighting me in the dark, and I don't know who they are. And I'm pouring my soul out on stage. So I haven't met this person. I maybe haven't met the sound person, and they're touching me and putting the microphone on. So as an EDI consultant, I go in and say, hey, everyone, welcome to tech. Let's all gather on stage. I make sure everyone knows everyone's name in the space. I make sure we all look each other in the eye. I make sure I break the ice so we all say something human.
Yeah.
Right? So then immediately I know as an actor who's looking at me from the dark, and I can feel a little more comfortable in my own skin. So that it's just...
And that's just one smallish thing that can really help the whole. The whole is always greater than the sum of its parts.
That's it. That's it. And I've been in places where, big time, they're like, we don't have time to do that. We don't have 10 minutes to give you. So I've literally had actors and designers meet me outside sometimes to, and this is not in, I won't name it. This is not in Boston. This is elsewhere. But meet me outside, and they'll meet me outside, and we'll do like a 10-minute circle, and it makes all the difference.
Wow.
Sometimes people will give me 30 minutes to just have a conversation, and they'll say it sets them on the path to be open and calm and just like you said, it's worth it. It's worth that time. Even though it feels like we have no time, it saves you time later on.
I wanted to rewind to the equity part of this because that's so that you put that as number one,
Yes.
And I think how every job has a hierarchy, which you mentioned as well. And there will always be someone in charge. So how is it establishing and still maintaining that there still needs to be that power dynamic, yet your voice is still heard, but ultimately someone else still has the final say?
That's right.
Right?
Yep, 100%. And that is another area I recognized when I started working was directors, specifically freelance directors and stage managers, were not being empowered as leaders in this space. I think people got the memo we had to take care of actors before they got the memo that we also had to take care of the people leading them.
But you can't let the actors run over you either.
No.
Because it is ultimately in the hands of other people to shape and mold a production and to take what's good and what's bad and yet to honor your thoughts and take care of you as well.
That's right. And our newest service through Art and Soul is called Inclusive Leadership Orientation. And it is literally about bridging the gap between a company, so, the company that is the building and the artist, and we're empowering the freelance leaders to learn about the company's culture and their tools and skills so they can bring it into the room. Because right now we kind of leave that freelance person out to dry.
Yes.
Go and lead this room. Good luck, right?
Good luck. You might not even be familiar with this organization. You've been brought in.
Yeah.
You've never directed here before.
Nope. And the actors are going to think, well, that's what it is to work here, is working with this director who actually has not been equipped, right? So that's one part of it. But the other part is when I go in and I always do a guidelines conversation. So like a room agreement on the first day. And I always say, everyone can take off their title and just be a human. So let's talk about how we want to show up in the space. Director, what do you mean when you say, I want you to be on time? Does that mean 5 minutes early so you can stretch? What does it mean?
Does that mean ready to go?
So I hope to free people so that they can have that conversation so that when we leave it and we put our titles back on, we've established connection so that the leader is equipped to lead.
Yes.
And having heard everyone else in the room.
So tell me more about this training protocol that you've established, because it's really taking off, and you've had a lot of people already signing up and explain this sort of hybrid model that you started to create.
Yes, it became very clear to me, especially when I got pregnant for the second time, early 2024.
You said, I can't be everywhere.
I said, I can't run around. I want to. Can't run around the country solving the problems by myself. And there's a lot of amazing people out there who can do this. So I realized I had to codify what I was doing. So I created a framework. It's called STAGES, the STAGES framework, and it's an acronym. And this is the framework for how I've been building this work. So from S, setting the scene, all through the framework to strike. So the last word, we use theater terms to like you strike a set. You want to strike the human process as well. So what went well? What do we need to fix? What feedback do we need to address? And we take it back through the framework. So it's a framework for working on shows, for working on seasons, for just, I use this, if you're watching, you can see I'm doing like a circle with my hands because it's a cycle, it's a circle. So shortly after I created the framework, I partnered with two incredible women. So Zena Collins.
Shout out.
Shout out to my partners. Zena Collins of Emotional Maths and Dr. Charmaine Jackman of InnoPsych. So I have someone who deals with operations and the business end, and someone who works with mental health from a psychologist's point of view, and then me from the artist's lens. And the three of us come together to create this training that we think is the missing skills that we need in art spaces and theater spaces and everywhere so that people are resilient enough to do this work going forward.
Fantastic. I just want to have one final question for you. And I'm just wondering if there's a specific project or achievement in your career so far that's brought you the most personal satisfaction.
Oh,
It's loaded. And I hear about the work you're doing all the time, from tiny little squabbles within a cast to much larger issues. So is there anything that really sticks with you
sure.
as a victory?
I'll say-
A victory.
Of course, yes. Yes. Okay, so since we focused on the EDI work, I'm gonna lean into that because I feel like I've had, just moments as a mom, moments as a partner, as an actor, as an EDI consultant. So I had the privilege of working on a show at Goodspeed Musicals. It was called Summer Stock at the time, and we're hoping it goes to Broadway.
Is that the one with Corbin Blue?
Yes.
Oh, he's a star. What a star.
And he is as nice as you want him to be. Like he is the real deal.
Love to hear that.
And I was brought in, they were reworking the show that is based on a 1950s movie with Gene Kelly and Judy Garland. And they were reimagining the show with a black man as Gene Kelly, Corbin Blue, and a colorful cast. So I was brought in, and not only did I get to do my thing with, facilitating and talking to folks, I got to work with the writer, Sherry Steinkelner, on like the how do we address people's racial identity change in the script to reflect now, even while we're telling this 1950s story. So I just got to be a part of that process the whole way through.
Fabulous.
And I always say, like, the best achievement in that was the New York Times reviewed the show. And the title is something like, "The cast of Summer Stock is having a ball." And it was just like, the show is great and they're bursting with joy. They love each other. We can see it. And I always say, my name isn't in that review, but that's my work, is that you could feel the joy and connection of that group because we were able to set that up in the room and even before we got in the room. So I'm very, very proud of that. And I still see them just like getting drinks in New York and going to each other's shows. And I really just think that's a testament to what happens when you create rooms like that.
Fantastic. Kira, it's been such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's been so great.
Where can folks find you?
Oh, I'm going to look here. Yes. So you can find us on Instagram. You can find us at Art and Soul Consulting, Art and A-N-D, Soul Consulting. Also Inclusive Stages, so at Inclusive Stages. And then we have our website, www.artandsoulconsulting.com. You can find me, Kira Troilo, everywhere, Troilo. And yeah, I think that's where you can find me.
And I hope you'll come back soon, because I have questions we didn't even touch on, and there's so much that we can just keep diving into, and all of it is just so important and it's so thought-provoking as an artist, as someone who goes in and watches theater too, even as an audience member, to understand what work is being done or could be done and how that serves the production of what you get to finally sit back and enjoy on the stage.
Yes.
Thank
Well,
you.
I'll come back anytime.
Fantastic. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Arts for the Masses. If you are a Massachusetts arts organization, whether it's theater or opera or dance or visual art, or puppetry, I need some puppeteers in here, please be in touch. I'd love to have you on the show. And if you're doing fantastic work like Kira is doing, I want to know about that as well. I love having these deep conversations. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Ryan Malyar.